Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jake Daly. Today is Wednesday, April 9th. We've got a good show for you today. We are going to discuss some of the house settlement. It's looking to get finalized right now, looking a little closer to the end goal. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to touch on some Northwestern football. They recently came out that they're settling some of their hazing allegations lawsuits from 2022-2023 under PAC Fitzgerald. Going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to get into some Coach of the Year candidates as well as potential teams that may join the PAC in this next round of conference realignment. Make sure you stick around for our final segment where we're going to talk a little bit more about Deion Sanders in Colorado and his comments that his guys, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, are the surest bets in this year's draft. But before we get into all of that, I'd just like to remind everyone to like and subscribe, as well as please tip donate. We appreciate every bit of your support. If you've got a question during the show, we want to hear it. If you've got a comment, just a thought, anything like that, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make absolutely sure that your message stands out, gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Use the super chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also just a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you every bit of the sports content that you love, and we appreciate all of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking. Hit that super chat button, and let's just keep this show as interactive and as fun, as exciting as possible. And if you prefer, you can also go to gsmcsport.net to tip, donate, and leave a comment or question there. We couldn't do what we do without your amazing support. We are so glad to have you as a part of our community. All right, let's talk a little bit about this house settlement. So obviously, this has been one of the big news stories throughout the college football, throughout the college athletics world. In the past year or so, this has really been picking up steam. So federal judge, U.S. District Court Judge Claudia Wilken, she just heard objections on Monday, final objections. She was able to make a final ruling. That was an option. It was kind of expected that was not going to happen on Monday. And it did not. So she heard some objections, and she did have her own comments, suggestions, a couple things that she brought up that she thought could maybe be tweaked or amended between these two sides. Mind you, this is a $2.8 billion case lawsuit. It's a combination of a couple different lawsuits against the NCAA. So this is big time. And if approved, this settlement would allow schools to begin paying athletes directly as soon as July 1st. So this is going to be really impacting even the spring transfer portal, guys that are going to transfer later on this year. This is going to be something that's going to affect them. So one of the big things, obviously, is basically the salary cap. So, in essence, schools are only going to be able to pay their athletes up to $20.5 million this season, this year. That's going to have to be spread across all of their athletics. And it's kind of up to schools' discretion what they want to spend it on. If they want to spend it on football, basketball, Olympic sports, female sports, anything, that's each school's prerogative. That's their decision. So it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, you'll probably see more of the basketball powerhouses, blue bloods like Duke, North Carolina. Well, North Carolina could be an interesting one. But Duke, some of those guys like that, Kansas, they're probably going to lean more into men's basketball. Obviously, probably some of the SEC schools are going to go heavy into football. But basically, it's going to be a salary cap. That's going to be their limit, $20.5 million. This is going to be a 10-year agreement between the NCAA and the power conferences. So 10 years, and over the course of that deal, each year it's expected that this salary cap, I'm going to call it a salary cap. It's not technically, but in essence it is. I'm going to call it that. And basically, that number is going to rise every single year of that 10-year deal. So it's going to start at $20.5 million. It's just going to keep going up from there. So some of the objections that Claudia Wilken had brought up in her kind of arguments, I guess, I don't know the legal term, but so there's a few things that she brought up. She did ultimately express optimism for the deal to go through, but her most pressing questions were really about roster size limits. There's about future college athletes kind of being bound by settlement, and as well as just the issues of third-party donations, third-party agreements, kind of NIL collective-based stuff like that. So the way this is going to work now is each team can allocate full or partial scholarships for as many or as few athletes as it wants within the allotted number of roster spots. So it's not going to be how football was, these past, I don't know how long, but it used to be you had 85 scholarship players, and then after that, you can have however many walk-ons you want. Most teams would tend to have between 110 and 120 guys on their football roster, but obviously only 85 scholarships. That's not going to be the case anymore. So there's going to be no scholarship limit. It's going to be a hard roster limit. So for football, this hard roster limit is going to be 105 players. And like I said, most programs, even though they only have 85 scholarship guys, the vast majority of football programs probably have around 120 guys, just with walk-ons, preferred walk-ons. And these are the guys that are going to get cut. I know I just saw Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia going back there. He just cut 22 guys, and that included a couple freshmen, a couple transfer senior guys that had tried to come in and make it at West Virginia. And these kids had to get cut because this is a hard roster limit. And even though the settlement has not passed, he's prepping for it. And he also mentioned that they want some more guys in the portal. So they're probably going to have to cut another 5 to 10 guys. And this is going to be the reality for the vast majority of football as well as other athletic sports. And that was one of Claudia Wilken's main kind of contentious points. She was kind of questioning it, was that a lot of sports are going to they're going to threaten roster spots. These athletes are going to get cut because, especially when you think about some of the Olympic sports, some of the smaller sports, a lot of those kids are going to be walk-ons, preferred walk-ons. They might not have an actual full scholarship. And so with this roster limit compared to a scholarship limit, it's going to cut a lot of these kids' places in this sport. And so we're talking maybe a couple thousand athletes across the country that are in jeopardy of having their spot taken, or their spot just taken away purely because of this roster limit size. I know someone personally who had their roster spot taken away from swimming at Washington State because of this incoming settlement. There were a couple of athletes that spoke in these final arguments on Monday, basically saying that. There was a swimmer, a freshman, I don't remember from what school I know, but he had said that the coaches already told him, hey, we're not going to have a spot for you, unfortunately, because we have to prepare for this. So Wilkens, she kind of brought up that the idea that maybe those athletes that are already in college could be grandfathered into this rule. I really like that. I think it makes a lot of sense. The only thing that I'm kind of wondering is how that affects, I guess, incoming classes. When would it balance out, essentially? That's what I think, because that would probably be 3 or 4 years down the line, and it'd probably be tough to balance out. So that's the only thing that I could see being an issue with kind of trying to grandfather these athletes in. But I do feel for the kids. I think it's a tough situation to be in, especially if you're one of those athletes. But on the flip side, there's going to be a lot of athletes that do benefit from this, especially in the world of college football. There's going to be a lot of guys that are going to be able to make some money from here. And it's not just going to be your top high-level guys. The other big piece of this was revenue sharing. And the figure that I saw, which I was kind of surprised by, was that revenue sharing could almost be 50-50 between athletic programs and athletes. And personally, I think that's kind of crazy. I don't know if crazy is the right word. I think it's really interesting. I'm an advocate for athletes to be paid. I think that's a good thing at this point in the junction of where the NCAA is. It makes a lot of sense. They're basically professional athletes. And it makes sense that they should get some of the money that they basically generate for these schools. However, taking half of that money, that's a really big number. That's also, look at how much goes into running an athletic program, just running an athletic office, having so many different varsity sports that you have to take care of. And if you're giving half of that money away, that's going to be a big chunk, and it's going to affect what a lot of these schools can do. Between travel, between paying athletes, between just having facilities for them, having the best equipment, the best coaching staffs, because all of that is from the athletics money that's generated by these athletes. Obviously, I do think that they should get a certain percentage of it. I think that that's definitely something they're entitled to. That should be a part of what they're doing. But the idea that they should earn half of what this revenue is that's a lot of money. I think probably a 70-30 split, maybe even 60-40, that makes more sense. They're still getting a substantial chunk of change. They're still generating a lot of this money. They're still getting a really good percentage, a good portion of this, especially when you look at some of the figures that some of these athletic offices just generate in general. It's a staggering number for some of these really big time schools, and if you're gonna give your athletes half that money, that's really gonna affect what these programs can do. It's gonna be interesting to see. I think if that's the actual number, if it is truly 50-50, you're gonna see programs making cuts. You're gonna see teams saying, hey, we can't build this new facility. At Ole Miss, they just built the Manning Center 2 or 3 years ago. That was a nine-figure athletic facility purely for football. Now think about if your athletes are taking half of your revenue, are you going to be able to build that kind of facility? Are you going to be able to do something like that for your athletes? I think that's going to be the big thing here is, are these athletes, obviously they're benefiting from revenue share, but if they're getting, some of their things that they take for granted, some of their facilities, some of their coaching staff, just the training staff, nutrition, if some of that stuff starts to get cut, does the revenue outweigh that? I think that's going to be something to really look at here, and we're going to see. But it sounds like this is going to be approved in the next few weeks. This house settlement will happen. College athletes will get paid. So now we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little Northwestern football, touch on their former head coach, Pat Fitzgerald. But first, we're going to take a short break. We'll see you shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody
wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast on this Wednesday, April 9th. Just touched on a little bit about the House settlement. Gonna go on the other side of the legal spectrum, talk a little bit about Northwestern. But first, I just want to remind everyone, this show is all about you. We love hearing from you during the show. Whether you've got a burning question, a hot take on the game, or just something that you've been dying to share, we're all ears. This show is about keeping the conversation lively and making sure your voice is part of the mix. So don't be shy, drop your thoughts in the chat, and if you really want to make sure that your comment or your question gets noticed, why not use Super Chat? Just hit the $ below the chat box, send in your message, and it's guaranteed to get featured on the show. Plus, it's a great way to support our channel. Your Super Chats help us keep the lights on and bring you even more of the content that you love. We're so grateful for each and every one of you who joins us here. Your support makes all the difference. So let's keep the conversation going. Send in those Super Chats, and together we can make this show even better. If Super Chat isn't your thing, you can also go to gsmcsport.net to tip, donate, and leave your comment or question there. We appreciate every bit of your support. And make sure you stick around for my fourth segment. I'm going to get into some Coach of the Year candidates. It'll be a good one. But first, we're going to dive into a little Northwestern. So, this just came out that Northwestern is they're finalizing some lawsuits that had been pending against the school for these hazing incidents that came out 2022, 2023. So, it was November 2022, a former player, a Northwestern football player, reported hazing allegations to the school. They conducted an investigation at the time. School didn't find any evidence of Pat Fitzgerald knowing about this or the coaching staff knowing about the hazing incident, but they did determine that Fitzgerald had ample opportunities to kind of discover about this and report this hazing. So that comes out November 2022. Pat Fitzgerald suspended by the school July 2023. And this was interesting too. Fitzgerald was suspended for 2 weeks. Northwestern players came out, released a letter defending him, saying, hey, this is our coach, this is our guy. We don't believe that he knew about anything like this. And so then even the school president, Michael Schill, he was the one that suspended Pat Fitzgerald. He released a statement saying that he may have erred in his decision after suspending him, after the players came out. So then he says, hey, I may have been wrong here. However, days later comes out more Northwestern former players. They come out, they allege racism, and then hours later after that, Pat Fitzgerald's fired. So some of the things that they had said, some players also alleged that there were sexualized acts going on and other rituals during the team's preseason training camp and at other times during the season. So this was a pretty surprising story at the time. Pat Fitzgerald, this was a guy that was a Northwestern legend. He was an All-American, had played in the league for a couple of years, and this was a guy that Northwestern fans, and really fans across the country, respected a lot. Fitzgerald had multiple opportunities to kind of jump to a higher coaching position. He had been at Northwestern for 15, 20 years at that time, and he had gotten looked at by, I know Notre Dame had interviewed him when they were looking at Marcus Freeman. I know there was a couple different positions where he definitely probably could have jumped to a higher profile major job. He was really respected across the country. So this was kind of surprising when this came out. Kind of shocking, but Fitzgerald gets fired. Northwestern actually has a really good year on their interim head coach, David Brown. They go 8-5, I believe. Had a really solid season. And so this is kind of fallen by the wayside, kind of something that people, didn't really remember that much, has kind of gotten out of the public eye. But there were lawsuits. There were other instances, legal matters that had been pursued against Northwestern, against Pat Fitzgerald. So this settlement's been reached. Northwestern, I'm not sure, the financial agreement has not been disclosed. Any financial terms have not been disclosed. But this is a big thing. It's still going on. This, obviously, Northwestern's not being punished anymore. And it also came out, Fitzgerald's attorneys, they released a statement on Monday saying that there remains no evidence of any wrongdoing by Pat Fitzgerald. There was nothing that came out in discovery. I believe that they had multiple depositions. The Northwestern side had also had multiple depositions with, I want to say there was around 70 former players that they had deposed and taken statements from. So this was a big thing. It's still going on. But Fitzgerald's attorneys, they're pretty adamant that Pat Fitzgerald did not know about this or have any kind of knowledge. Which that's interesting, just from, normally a head coach of a football program kind of knows what's going on. But there are definitely certain instances when that's not the case, when stuff is done by assistants or support staff that the head coach does not know. So do we know for sure that Pat Fitzgerald did or did not know about this? We do not. But Fitzgerald's adamant that he did not know about this. He still has a pending lawsuit against Northwestern for wrongful termination. That date is set for November 1st. They're about to go to court for that. November 3rd. That's the date for that. And so this was interesting too. In his lawsuit, Fitzgerald claims that he actually had a verbal agreement with Schill, with the man who suspended him for 2 weeks, that he wouldn't be punished further. Schill allegedly told Fitzpatrick that, hey, after this suspension, nothing else is going to happen. You're good. I needed to suspend you. We didn't find anything that said you knew about this. We didn't find any wrongdoing per se. So, after the suspension, you're coming back. Nothing else is going to happen. You're not going to be punished. We're just going to go with it. And then, obviously, he does get fired after a few days later. So that's really his big claim right now. Fitzgerald's big claim is that, hey, I had this verbal agreement. And obviously, an oral agreement is not the same as a written contract. Written agreement doesn't hold the same weight, especially in the court of law. But that's his main claim. So, and he's also seeking, this is an $130 million lawsuit that Pat Fitzgerald's seeking right now. It was broken down by, the two numbers are 68 and 62. One of them is the amount of time that he had left on his current deal with Northwestern at the time. The other number is for future damages, for future, any profit he would have made, any salary he would have made from future coaching down the line in these past few years. I can't remember which one is which, but those were the two numbers. Again, this is going to be an interesting one to see. I'm not sure. It's normally pretty hard for a coach to win a wrongful termination lawsuit, especially if the school has any kind of solid evidence. I also think just with the situation in general, it's going to be probably pretty difficult for Pat Fitzgerald to win that wrongful lawsuit termination case. I don't know, though. I could be wrong. I'm just speculating here. This is nothing I know for sure. I just feel like it's probably going to be pretty difficult for Pat Fitzgerald to win that. But again, I don't know any of the details. I haven't seen any official documents. I haven't heard any deposition or testimony, so I don't know. It could be completely wrong. However, this was something that was really a big deal, especially for Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald was really respected around the country. Kind of did lose all of his standing just around the nation, especially with Northwestern, the school that he played at, that he was an All-American at, that he really loved, and clearly they wanted him to be there too for a long time. That's not the case right now, obviously. Fitzgerald, for his part, he has not stepped foot back into college coaching. He's currently just like a volunteer assistant with his son's high school team. And I don't think there's going to be a program, at least in the next few years, that'll take a chance on him. Depending on the way this lawsuit goes, depending on what other information comes out, there's a chance, that somebody down the line will take a shot at Pat Fitzgerald and say, hey, we're going to give you another chance to coach in college. Sorry, I'm losing my voice there. Had to clear the throat for a second. Excuse me. But yes, this is going to be a big deal. And we're going to see how it all kind of shakes out. Obviously, these hazing lawsuits seem to be settled. That's probably going to go away. Not go away, but it won't be in the news as much. It's kind of going to be settled. I think the big thing here is what's going to happen with Pat Fitzgerald's wrongful termination lawsuit, and if we're going to find out any other information about kind of what actually happened at Northwestern, and if he did know anything. So it'll be tough to see, but we're going to find out. Things play out in court. That's how it goes. So right now, we're going to take our second break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Pac-12, or the Pac-7, I guess. But we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just talked a little bit about Northwestern. We're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about the PAC. I don't even know if I want to call it the Pac-12. Obviously, it's not the Pac-12 right now. It was the Pac-2 last year. I guess it's the Pac-7 right now. But yeah, only 7 football teams. The Pac-12 needs another football member in order to be a conference. And from the looks of it, I think they want to be a conference. Obviously tried to maintain the conference after pretty much everybody left, after it was just Washington State and Oregon State on an island. They quickly came together, added a couple Mountain West teams, San Diego State, Utah State, who else? There's a couple other ones, Colorado State, but mostly Mountain West. Boise State, there was a Boise State, that was a big one. But they still need another team. They did get Gonzaga as a basketball-only member, but they need another football team. So let's look at some of the options. I think the number one option for them right now is going to be Sacramento State. So Sac State is just applied to join the FBS as an independent. I think that's probably going to be pretty cut and dry. They're going to be approved. They're going to move from the SES to the FBS. Obviously, right now, there's only, I know Notre Dame's an independent. UMass isn't an independent anymore. They're actually joining a conference. Army and Navy aren't even independents anymore. They're in the AAC. So there's really only one or two independents in the nation right now. Sac State's going to join them, but obviously this move is setting them up to join a conference in the near future. I think that conference is probably going to be the Pac-12. It makes a lot of sense. Sacramento State's in their market on the Pacific Coast. Sacramento, number 20 media market in the country, pretty good size media market. They have a lot more money resources than pretty much anyone kind of realizes. They kind of fly under the radar in terms of that. And they also have invested heavily in the past couple years in basketball and football. Hired a new head coach, Brendan Marion. He was the UNLV offensive coordinator. Hired him in December. So obviously bringing in a guy from the FBS level that had a lot of success. UNLV had a really solid offense last year. Dealt with multiple quarterbacks. That's going to be their new head coach. Also brought in Mike Bibby as their new men's basketball coach. So clearly Sacramento State's trying to jump up a level. They're trying to compete with the big guys, the big dogs. And it looks like, I think they're probably going to be gunning for a Pac-12 invitation. I think that's the most likely option. But I don't know if the Pac would be done yet. I think there's a couple other really solid options, really solid teams for them to look at. I think the next biggest one, is going to be Texas State. So Texas State, obviously, they play in the Sun Belt, located in San Marcos. That's pretty much right outside Austin, kind of in that greater Austin metropolitan area. And this could be a way for the Pac-12 to try to break into the Texas market. So the Mountain West, obviously, they added UTEP, I believe. It was UTEP or UT San Antonio. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. But they're breaking into that Texas market. I think if the Pac-12 wants to try to do the same thing, they need Texas State. Texas State makes a lot of sense. Is a lot bigger than people realize. I didn't know they had 40,000 undergrads, so that's a really good sized school. They're also an R2 research institution, meaning they have some funds. They have a little bit more resources than people kind of realize, and they probably can join a guest power conference. I don't know if I really want to call the Pac-12 power conference right now. They've kind of declined a little bit just since their dissolution, but this could be a really solid option for the Pac if they wanted to try to break into that Texas market, want to try to maybe get into that and just expand their geological footprints, bring in another school that's got a decent amount of resources. I think Texas State makes a lot of sense. Obviously, they're not really going to be able to get any of the other big Texas schools. Most of those schools are locked into the Big 12. Baylor, Texas Tech, TCU, Houston just joined the Big 12. So most of those big-time Texas schools, the ones with more resources, they're not going anywhere. They're going to stay in the Big 12. They're not going to leave the Big 12. It's a better situation right now for them, and it's more stable. But Texas State, I think, could be a really decent option for them, for the PAC, if they want to try to expand that footprint, if they want to keep growing that market. Now, if they really want to try and expand their footprint, I know they asked these two teams earlier this year, in late October 2024, they tried to extend an invitation to Tulane and to Memphis. Now I'm going to talk about Tulane first. If I think Tulane's a really decent option if the Pac-12 wants to try to break into the South. Obviously, Tulane's an original SEC school. They've had a really good amount of success on the gridiron recently under Willie Fritz, as well. John Sumrall, new head coach. He's had a ton of success. Sorry. I don't know why that word's so hard for me sometimes. Success. At Tulane, they've been a really solid program the past 5-10 years. And they're in a really big market. They're in New Orleans, pretty much right in the city. R1 Research Institution. They've got plenty of funds. That's a pretty expensive school to attend. Their tuition's around $80,000 a year, but they have the resources, they have the ability to join the Pac-12. I just wonder, does it make sense for them to actually make that move? I think it makes more sense for them than for Memphis, just because there's a couple different reasons, but I think Tulane, they're a little more flexible, they're a little more willing to adapt, and they have the money to be able to travel consistently to the Pacific Coast to compete in a conference that does that. And I think it can make sense for them. If they want to be, I think Tulane would be really well. They do really well in the Pac too. I think they'd have success on the football field. I think they're probably a pretty similar profile program compared to a Washington State or an Oregon State. They might be a tier or two below that, but they're not far off. And I think they're probably ahead of some of those Mountain West teams that the Pac-12 has brought in. I think they're a better program than Colorado State, than Utah State, probably than San Diego State. And I think Boise's kind of a toss-up because Boise is normally pretty consistently pretty solid. But I think Tulane can make a lot of sense as a member of the Pac-12. Memphis, they've also, the Pac tried to reach out, get feelers from Memphis right at the same time as Tulane. I think that's another option for trying to break into the South, trying to break into that market. Memphis, obviously, decent-sized media market. They might be more attainable. I think they're probably more likely to stay in the American Athletic Conference, just in terms of financial aspects. I think Tulane has a little bit more resources than Memphis. So it's going to be difficult for Memphis to, try to move to the Pac-12, even if they wanted to. I don't know if they'd be able to do that with travel consistently. And the other thing with Memphis is they're really more of a basketball school, especially since Penny Hardaway's been there in the past 4 or 5 years. They've really put more money, more resources into basketball. And obviously the Pac is not going to be a super strong basketball conference. Gonzaga's going to join, but besides that, there's really not a team or a program that is consistently really solid at basketball, and that's really more of Memphis's speed. Obviously, they have had decent football teams in the past 5-10 years. They have a season or two where they're really good, or they're a potential top 25 team, but for the most part, this is a basketball school. So I think the Pac could try to reach out to them, if the PAC was able to get a decent TV deal, I think that might be enticing to Memphis. But besides that, I don't think that Memphis is going to be the team that will join the PAC. I think of the two southern schools, I think Tulane's a lot more likely to actually make that jump. But really, I think this is between Sacramento State and Texas State. And those are going to be your big two names, I think, that are going to keep coming up. And we're going to keep hearing them about the Pac-12. The other thing that I just think is kind of fun, I kind of doubt this is even going to be a conversation. But obviously, Northern Illinois kind of joining the Mountain West. Is there a MAC team that maybe has a chance? I don't think so, personally. That's more kind of for fun. But you never know. Maybe an Akron Zips, maybe a Ball State kind of says, hey, we could maybe try to do this in the PAC. I doubt it. I think that's just more my speculation. That's more just for fun for me. But I'm a MAC guy, personally. So, gotta shout out those guys. But I think this is really seriously between probably Sacramento State and Texas State. But I wouldn't count out either Tulane or Memphis just yet. We don't know how this is going to go. Realignment's been crazy. It will continue to be crazy. It's going to be something that's going to keep being brought up. But this is just fun to speculate about. And I think we're going to keep hearing Sacramento State and Texas State's names in the near future. So we're going to take our next break of the show. When we come back, we're going to go over coaches. We're going to talk to some guys that I think could maybe be a Coach of the Year candidate. Going to have some fun with that. So we're going to take our break, and we'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. I messed up there. We are not talking about the potential teams to join the PAC. We just did that. Instead, we're talking Coach of the Year candidates. There's a couple guys that I think can be really solid coaches and candidates for Coach of the Year. I got 4 or 5 guys on this list. Just going to run through some of them. My first name I have is Shane Beamer. Now, Shane Beamer, obviously son of Frank Beamer, Virginia Tech coach, legendary defense. He's been at South Carolina the past couple of years now. Had a really great season at South Carolina this past year. Got them up to, they were 14th or 15th in the country, went 9-3, had some really impressive results, impressive wins. Had starting quarterback Lenore Sellers, had a decent defense with 2 solid defensive ends in Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart, and just kind of surprised people. This team wasn't really expected to compete seriously in the SEC. I think probably a lot of people saw them as a 7-8 win team, maybe even less. Like slightly above 500, but they came out and they went 9-3. Really didn't get blown out. Their worst loss was probably against Ole Miss at home. They kind of struggled that day. Offense didn't really get going, but besides that, they were a really solid team. And I think this is a team that can make a jump again this next year. Lenore Sellers is coming back at quarterback. It's a guy that's really high potential, played really well, is more accurate than you would expect from a dual threat quarterback. So it's a guy that's going to quarterback that ship. He's going to be the main guy there again. Also on defense, you have the return of Dylan Stewart. He 5-star freshman defensive end, had a really solid season, kind of tailed off towards the end, but going to be a sophomore this year, going to be coming into his own, has learned, has grown, his body has developed, and this is going to be a guy that I think could be a stud. So when you have that star quarterback, that defensive end, and that team that was 9-3 last year, yes, they are going to lose some guys. Nick Emenwari, their safety, is probably going to be a first-round pick this year. They're going to lose. I believe Kyle Kennard is also going to the draft. I have to triple check that one. But this is a team that's going to be good again. And I think if they compete for an SEC title, at least in their division in the SEC East, that's going to be Shane Beamer is going to have a legitimate shot to be the coach of the year. Switching sides of the country, another younger guy, Kenny Dillingham, had a phenomenal season last year at Arizona State. That hire was kind of unexpected when Arizona State hired him. He did play there. He was quarterback there, but still only 35 when Arizona State hired him away from Oregon to be their head coach. Really grew into his own. He guided Arizona State to a completely unexpected Big 12 championship, college football playoff berth. Really showcased his offense, his ability as a coach. Kind of an eccentric dude. If you ever watch any of his interviews, it's funny. He's definitely got that younger kind of quirky coach personality that some of these younger coaches have. But I really like him. I think he's a really good coach. And yes, he's going to lose Cam Scatterbo. That was the heart and soul of their team last year at Arizona State. But he's still going to have Sam Levitt. He's still going to have wideout Jordan Tyson. And I think if he has the same amount of success that he did this past season, if Arizona State wins another Big 12 championship, if they somehow get into the college football playoff again, I think Kenny Dillingham absolutely deserves Coach of the Year. Just his offensive scheme, the way he gets his guys to play. Arizona State really never gave up last season. They weren't expected to be in it, and they just kept pushing, kept winning games. And that's a credit to Kenny Dillingham's ability as a coach, his ability to motivate his guys to keep them to get going. I think some of it was Cam Scatterbo too, just the way he played. But again, reflects on your coach. And I think if Kenny Dillingham has another season like last season, if he repeats that success this year, I think he should be Coach of the Year. I think that's really a place that makes a lot of sense, and he deserves it at that point. Now, my next name, I don't know if I really truly believe that he's a Coach of the Year candidate, but I had to put him on just for the off chance that he actually does really have a good season, and that's Bill Belichick. Obviously, probably the NFL's greatest coach of all time. I am in that category. I know that's kind of up for debate between some people. I think he is, just in terms of the success he had in New England. But really, I have no idea how this is going to go in Chapel Hill. Belichick has never coached in college. He's 71, 72, something like that. He's had his way. He's set the Patriot way, the famed Patriot way for 20 years. And he's going to do things his way. He said he was going to run it like an NFL-style program. He brought in Mike Lombardi as a GM, brought in a lot of his former assistants. Freddie Kitchens is the offensive coordinator. I think, realistically, I don't think he's going to have a great year in Chapel Hill. I think you're definitely going to see some improvement. I could see them being, a 7-5, 8-4 team, and then making a jump in year 2. But you never know. it's very possible that they come out and shock everybody and, make a run to the ACC championship game. And I think if that's the case, Belichick's got to be a Coach of the Year candidate, especially in his first year as a college coach. But I honestly have no idea. I think this is one of the more interesting storylines of the offseason. It does kind of seem like Belichick's trying to get a little more hip, I guess, and, up with the young guys. He brought in Lil Wayne to practice this past week, which I thought was just kind of a funny collab. Lil Wayne and Bill Belichick is just an interesting combination. But I have no clue how this one's going to go. I think Belichick could very well have success in New England, but at the same time, or not in New England. See, I already said New England. In North Carolina, it's just going to be a weird experience. It's going to be hard to see, Bill Belichick in that Carolina blue is just an interesting sight. So I don't know if he's actually a legit candidate, but I wanted to put him on. I think it's a fun thing to contemplate and think about. Next on the list, though, I think is really a legit candidate, Sharon Moore, Michigan head coach. And Michigan had a really weird season. They were kind of 500 the whole year, had awful quarterback play. Offense really couldn't do a whole lot, relied on their defense to win a lot of games. But they turned it up at the end of the year. They won their biggest game of the season, beating Ohio State in the shoe, and as heavy underdogs, going into Columbus, beating Ohio State, who obviously won the national championship this season. So that's a huge win for Michigan, and they've kept that going the past 3 or 4 years where they've beaten Ohio State. And then they go out, and after Ohio State, who do they beat? Oh yeah, Alabama. Michigan beats Alabama in a bowl game. Alabama was almost in the college football playoff, and they were beaten by 7-5 Michigan. So I think Michigan has a lot of momentum coming into this season. They will lose Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, so it's going to be interesting to see their defense. But I think their offense is going to be a lot better this year. Got Bryce Underwood in. I don't know if it's going to be him or Mikey Keene to start the season, but I think by midway point we're going to see Bryce Underwood. And I think this is a place where if the cards all fall right, Michigan could win the Big Ten again, or at least be in contention to win the Big Ten. I think they can have a 10-win season, and I think if something like that happens, if they beat Ohio State again, if they maybe fight their way into the Big Ten championship, I think Sharon Moore is a legit guy to look at there. My last name, I got Jeff Monken. Jeff Monken, obviously Army head coach, won the American Athletic Championship in his first season, in Army's first season in a conference in that league. Went 12-2, beat Tulane 35-14, I want to say, in their conference championship. And I think if he has another strong season, I think he's a guy that you can definitely look at for the award. The work he's done with Army, with the service academy, with their restrictions is unbelievable. Having a 12-win season, being ranked, you're fighting for a lot of kids that aren't high-level recruits, and you're developing them. And I think that's what a true coach does. Jeff Monken, if he has another season like this, I think he deserves that award. So we're going to take our final break of the show. And when we come back, we're going to finish up with Deion Sanders and his comments about his guys, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. But first, we're going to take our final break on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. We just talked about some Coach of the Year candidates. We're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about another head coach, Deion Sanders. So this week, it was a press conference after practice, and he was asked about his guys, about Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. And so his quote was basically, he said a couple different things. He was talking for about 30 seconds. I watched the video, and he said, "We have the most qualified guys in the draft. They're not a risk." And he was talking about Shedeur. He's like, Shedeur's done this year after year after year after year and been at the top of this category and this category and this category. And then he was talking about Travis, saying, Travis is one of a kind. And then he said that, this was a quote, he said, "The surest bets in this draft are these two young men." Now, I'm not surprised that Deion Sanders said this. Obviously, he's extremely confident in his guys. Shedeur, obviously his son, he's not going to say anything bad about his son. And then Travis Hunter, that there's not a lot to say bad about Travis Hunter. Just from an on-field perspective, this guy is legit. So, I think there's some truth to what he's saying. I agree. I think with part of it, I'll say that. I agree with the part about Travis Hunter. I do think Travis Hunter is one of a kind, is a sure bet, will be a star in the NFL. Doesn't matter what side of the ball he plays on. Doesn't really matter who drafts him. I think I don't want to say bust-proof, because if he does end up being a bust, I'm going to look dumb in about 5 years. But I think he's about as close to bust-proof as you can get. His ability to play both ways of the ball, do it at an elite level. I think even if he struggled on one side of the ball, he'd probably just end up switching sides, playing the other side of the ball. It looks like he's probably going to end up being wide receiver. Just kind of depends on where he gets drafted. I think if Cleveland drafts him, which is something that's been said pretty recently, the past week or so, is that Cleveland's kind of switched gears and is more locked in on Travis Hunter now. I think he probably plays wide receiver there, just for the lack of options besides Jerry Jeudy. And they probably sprinkle him in on, big time stops on third downs when they need a stop, or in the red zone, then they play him at cornerback. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's somewhere that he could really thrive. And then again, if he's in New York, I think he's kind of the same thing. The only way I could see, I really think he's probably going to be a wide receiver at the next level. He only ran routes during his pro day. But I agree. I think that Travis Hunter is one of the surest bets in the NFL draft. Just with his production, his elite athleticism, his drive to win, he's got that personality where this kid wants to be the best. And he does have the confidence. He has that swagger, that moxie, where he thinks he's the best. But I agree. I think Travis Hunter probably is one of the best bets in this draft. Probably about as risk-free, about as bust-proof as you can get as a prospect. Now, with Shedeur Sanders, I don't know about all that. And I do like Shedeur. I think he's a decent quarterback prospect. I don't know if he was in another draft class, if he would be a first-round draft prospect. And everything coming out this week saying he's kind of falling down boards. I'm not sure if that's all true. I think that's a little bit of just draft misdirection. This is a couple weeks before the draft now, and this is misdirection season. Happens every year. You start hearing crazy things a few weeks before the draft saying, hey, this guy's going to fall, this guy's going to get picked in the top 2, this guy, we hear it every year. And I don't know if Shedeur's actually going to fall. I kind of doubt it, just based off this quarterback class isn't that great. I think he's probably a tier behind Cam Ward, But I think in the right situation, Shedeur Sanders could be a pretty solid starting NFL quarterback. Now, is he one of the surest bets in this draft? No, I don't think so at all. I think that Shedeur's success in the NFL will depend heavily on where he gets drafted, on what coaching staff drafts him, and on the scheme fit. I think that's going to be a big factor for Shedeur Sanders. I think I don't know if he can succeed in Cleveland per se. If Cleveland wants to take him at 2, I think New York might be a better situation just because he can sit behind Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston for a year, kind of learn how to develop as a quarterback, how to get adjusted to the NFL. But I don't believe that Shedeur is truly one of the surest bets, that he comes without risk. I don't know if that's the case for him. Honestly, outside of Travis Hunter, I don't know if there's a lot of guys in this draft class that are sure bets, or risk-free, or, I'm not sure. I think that Abdul Carter is one of those guys that is very highly regarded as a prospect. I think he's probably one of the more sure bets in this draft, but he didn't have, he's just transitioning to edge rusher. He obviously had a lot of success this year, but it was hard. There wasn't a lot of tape on him rushing the passer in previous seasons. So, there's still a little bit of risk. Plus, he had that foot injury in this offseason where, teams aren't sure if he's fully healthy, if that's going to be something that affects him in OTAs, in training camp, whatever. But I think that's probably, besides Travis Hunter, I think that's probably your surest bet in the draft. I'm not super confident about any of the quarterbacks this year, even though as an Ole Miss guy, obviously I saw a lot of Jackson Dart. I'm not the biggest Jackson Dart fan. I think he's probably a guy that needs a system, needs the right system. Again, like Shedeur Sanders. I don't know if this year's draft class really has a lot of sure bets. I think Travis Hunter probably is one, but besides that, I don't know. But I think there's guys that are more sure bets than Shedeur Sanders. I think that Abdul Carter's probably a more sure bet. Mason Graham is probably a safer pick. There's a couple guys. I think Ashton Jeanty is a safe pick. Obviously, he's not going to be drafted super high just because of positional value of running back, but I think he's a safe pick to be a really good running back in the NFL. Will Campbell, there's a couple things that come with Will Campbell, just with his arm length, but his actual production, his ability to be a 3-year starter in the SEC and constantly, produce, not give up sacks, give really solid pass protection. I think that makes him, a safe pick, even if he does end up bumping inside to guard. I think just that quality of production, quality of play, that level play, it makes him a pretty safe pick. So, is Shedeur Sanders a safe pick? I don't really think so. I think that he could be a good quarterback. He certainly has the potential for it. But I'm not sure if that's, gonna be what happens to Shedeur. I think it really depends on the situation for him. And we're just gonna have to wait and see. So that's gonna be all for our show today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast presented to you by the GSMC Network. Your support means so much to us, so please remember to subscribe, like the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a lot of difference. And we also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content, more updates. Thank you once again, and have a wonderful day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to